Good afternoon. Welcome everybody for this edition of Lights and Basic History, sponsored in part by the John and Loretta Hines Foundation, our generous supporters for the campaign to create the Tyler History Center. So now you know where you are, and I just want to welcome everybody. Let me see. Anybody here your first time? Well, great, thank you. All right. Anybody been here more than 10 times? There we go. Yeah. Well, we appreciate the return business, and it's one of those programs that we will continue to do until you stop coming. So we're happy to keep going, and there's just literally thousands of topics we can cover that we haven't done already. For those of you who don't know, my name is Bill Lawson. I'm Executive Director of Mahoning Valley Historical Society. We own and operate this facility along with the Army Family Museum of Local History on Wick Avenue. And coming soon on East Federal Street will be our next facility, and there will be a very special museum in there around the Agora Park Experience collection. And we'll learn more about that as we go along, because it's literally in development and we're raising funds at this point. But in the shorter term, we want to point some things out for you that are coming up on our calendar. Monday, June 1st, we'll have our Mahoning Valley Cultural Alliance dinner, and it will be stories of immigrants, and it'll be about people who came to the Mahoning Valley from Croatia. And we're having it at the St. George Croatian Center on Vestal Road, and I can assure you the food is going to be fabulous if you've ever been there before. And if you want more information about it, we still have reservations available. It's $35 for members and $40 for non-members. And one of the advantages of being a member is discounts. So please see Anne Marie, who is over at the refreshment table, and she can file more information and also take your reservation. Seats are limited, did you hear that? Okay. Our annual membership meeting and Historic Preservation Awards program will be Tuesday, June 23rd, and that'll be 5:30 p.m. right in this room. Those of you who are members should be receiving your invitations right about now, and please get them in. We'll have our usual member business meeting and also the awards program. We have 5 award winners this year, and there's some really great projects involved in the awards program. Looking ahead, and of course, the weekend that includes July 4th will be a big one in terms of the anniversary. 250 years since the publishing of the Declaration of Independence, and there's plenty of events going on that weekend here in downtown. First Friday event around Central Square on Friday, July 3rd. Lots of celebrations in townships and villages throughout the Mahoning Valley on Saturday, July 4th. And then Sunday evening, July 5th, there will be a festival at the Youngstown Foundation Amphitheater here in downtown. The highlights will be Youngstown Symphony Orchestra performing and fireworks. So you don't want to miss that one. Also in July, we have Sunday, July 19th, and there's some information about it on the tables. We'll be celebrating National Ice Cream Day here at Tyler History Center because of our great connection to ice cream treats in the history of those confections here in the United States. And we'll have an open house at Tyler History Center from noon to 4 that Sunday afternoon. location here in downtown Youngstown. And also, the following week, on Tuesday, July 28th, we are opening a new exhibit marking and celebrating the centennial of successful commercial broadcasting here in Mahone Valley. And that'll be opening at the Arms Family Museum on Tuesday the 28th, and will run for a while after that. But these are highlights coming up, and I hope you can participate. Looking ahead to next month in June, on Thursday, June 18th, we'll have the presentation, The National Foundations of Industry, the story of Mill Creek Park, and Diana Alexander, who's a geologist and an educator on the staff of Mill Creek Metro Park, will be our presenter. That's Thursday, June 18th, here for the next installment of Life and Business History. And you may not know this if you're new, but all the programs this year are lined up with the monthly themes that are programmatic for America 250. And we're going to be talking about arts and culture today, and then we'll be talking about industry and natural areas in June. So we're keeping that going. But now it's time to get to today. And our speaker is someone very close to us here, Jessica Trickett, who is the Anco Polly Crispin Collections Manager for Mahone Valley Historical Society, and has been on our staff for almost 26 years. Yes. Started before she got into high school. No, wait, that was me. So, Jessica is a Youngstown native. As collections manager for the Historical Society, she curates the collection and works with developing and supervising the installation of museum exhibits, and works along with other staff, interns, and volunteers to make the collection accessible to the public. She presents lectures to professional, educational, and civic organizations, exploring themes in local history, including ethnic traditions, social roles, and local material culture. Jessica holds a Master of Arts degree with a certificate in historic preservation from Youngstown State University, and as she says here, she is stoked to be here today. So, her presentation is Gravestone, an arts and crafts home, and we'll be talking about another one of our facilities. I give you Jessica Trickett.
Thank you, Bill. I started working here actually as a child. I was in elementary 28 years ago. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I think we've got a great turnout. I appreciate it. I see some familiar faces in the audience. There's a few of our tour guides from Arms Family Museum, so we'll keep an eye and make sure I'm telling you the correct information. But today, as Bill mentioned, we're exploring the theme for America 250, and specifically in Ohio, of arts and culture throughout Ohio. And we thought, what better way to do that than to highlight our own historic homes that we operate here on the cabinet, which was called Gravestone by Alden Wilford Arms, who built the home. And now we support it. We have tour guides on staff 6 days a week, take you through the home and explain why it's special. How many of you have been to Arms Family Museum before? Great many of them. Wonderful. Maybe a lot of you have been there during Christmas time. We've got memories of Christmas past. It's something that we need to have famous for. But when it comes Christmas time, again, you can get a guided tour that talks about a lot of the things I'm going to tell you today as well. And just enjoy that beautiful, wonderfully preserved example of local architecture. So we're going to start again talking Gravestone and Arts and Crafts Home. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background right now on the Arts and Crafts movement. So when you say arts and crafts, that can bring a couple of different things to mind. Some of you might be thinking about kindergarten finger painting, Some of you might know the architectural or decorative arts movement that is called by that name. And so they used to think about late 19th or early 20th century rustic furniture, earth use ceramics, comfortable bungalows. But there's a philosophical movement behind all of that decorative wear that began over 170 years ago in England. And I'm going to talk to you about a few of the people who started that process. Okay. So this is a gentleman named Thomas Carlyle. He's an early 19th century English writer, and he might be called the father of the arts and crafts movement. His writing on the value of work in the past set the stage for others that came after him. This is John Ruskin. He's an art critic who followed up with writing on the virtues of art, especially architecture, as embodying the evidence of the human soul. So the tenets of the arts and crafts philosophy dealt primarily with issues of social relevance, specifically with the integral role of human creativity and labor. You have to think about the time period here. This was right as the Industrial Revolution was taking hold and changing the way people work, changing people's relationship with work. And these philosophers, art critics, artists, really saw that that was kind of dehumanizing, and it was bad for people and, for their connection with work and their craft. So Ruskin, and then later his disciple William Morris, stressed the interdependence of art and labor. They were both important for the well-being of society, not just making things to make them to make more money, but kind of being connected with the products of your labor. So as I mentioned, these ideas came as a reaction to industrialization, urbanization, and modernization, which had all but decimated the role of skilled individuals in the production of decorative art. With the rise of the Industrial Revolution came the division of labor. So as a result, instead of creating unique goods from start to finish, laborers were given tasks on an assembly line. So they're really kind of being reduced to just this superficial role, and also, supervising machines and turning out mass quantities of really kind of lower quality decorative items. So in order to reconnect artisans with the joy of labor, arts and crafts philosophers put forth the premise that the field of art encompasses more than just the high art of painting, sculpture, and things that you might go to a museum to see. It also included the so-called lesser arts, including architecture, the more everyday decorative pieces that are also functional objects in a home, like your furniture, pottery, textiles, wall covering. So by emphasizing the relationship between these high and lesser arts, the proponents of arts and crafts restore the dignity of the artisan, and they reunify art and labor. So the arts and crafts movement came to be not only a philosophy, but a way of life that was in sharp contrast to the commercial value of big business. And on this slide, you see some examples of the products that came out of arts and crafts philosophy. At the top, you have an architectural design for the Gamble House by architect William Green. You have a William Morris tapestry. You have Stickley chairs. You have ceramic tiles that are hand-painted. Brookwood pottery that became very kind of identifiable as examples of arts and crafts, decorative art. So arts and crafts really kind of equated with simplicity. The devotees of the movement idealized what they deemed as simpler eras, specifically the medieval period in Europe and the colonial period in America. And these eras were viewed as having been periods where workmen had the freedom of individual expression. And according to philosophers like Ruskin, buildings and objects had to be created with enjoyment to and they saw these periods as embodying those ideals. In the Gothic architecture of the medieval period, Ruskin saw a utility in design that had been abandoned for symmetry in the neoclassical period. So he says of Gothic builders, if they wanted a room, they added one. A buttress, they built one. Utterly regardless of any established conventionalities or external appearances. Both the utility of Gothic architecture and the beauty of handcrafted Gothic ornamentation captivated Ruskin and later ideologized. Now we'll connect it to our local history here with the Arms family, and specifically Olive Arms, who really, these ideals appealed to her and her design sensibilities, and inspired her in the creation of her home at Greystone. Pictured here are 4 of the 6 sisters, the Arms girls: Caroline, Catherine, Laura Bell, and all the way on the right is Olive Arms. Again, there were 6 girls, all of whom were well-educated and well-traveled. Their mother was Hannah McFarland, and she called the girls her beautiful jewels. Olive graduated from the Wood Street School in Youngstown in 1879. She was a talented artist, and she continued her art education in New York City, and also traveled with her family throughout Europe, drawing and painting landscapes and designs that caught her interest, some of which she ended up using as an inspiration in her home. Olive married Wilford P. Arms, a distant cousin, in 1899. And in our archives, we have a wonderful resource that Olive left for us. She wrote and presented an essay to her women's club titled "The Story of My House," and she used it as a manual for designing one's perfect home. In it, she says, if you leave the house to the architect he is trying to build merely for himself, he builds his house, not yours. So during their first years of marriage, Olive and Wilford Arms lived on Bryson Street in Youngstown. By 1904, they hired Cleveland architectural firm of Mead and Garfield to plan their new residence. And it was to be located on the 2 lots adjacent to Olive Arms' parents' home on Lake Avenue, which is now the Holy Trinity Union Orthodox Church right next to it. So by this time, Olive Arms' design philosophy was firmly in place. She knew exactly what she wanted in her home. And she would spearhead the design and planning of their home that they titled Greystone. From the English cottage exterior down to the details of closet placement and ceiling height. She knew the house she wanted, and she had seen details in other homes that she wanted to mimic at Greystone. So her love of the arts and crafts aesthetic was played out in the planning of her home and its gardens, which were just as important really to the interior as the interior design of the home. And this is evident through her own sketches that we have that she left us, again, in our archival collection. She sketched different room details, fireplace renderings, furniture designs, and wall finishes. So we have these wonderful records of exactly how she saw her home. One tenet of the arts and crafts movement was the use of nature and natural forms in design. And as industrialization had already taken its toll on the natural surroundings, philosophers like Ruskin and Morris strove to instill a love of nature in their peers. Morris's ideal was that, quote, all works of man that we live amongst and handle will be in harmony with nature, will be reasonable and beautiful, yet all will be simple and inspiring, end quote. So nature was thought to embody certain truths and virtues that were central to arts and crafts, the arts and crafts ideals, such as simplicity, integrity, and the suitability of form and function. Nature was also a source of beauty and lent itself well to the artistry of arts and crafts design. You can see here this is a rear view of Greystone in the early 1900s. You have woven wooden awnings over the windows that create interesting shadows, while garden beds of trees add exterior interest and beautiful landscapes to overlook. Another important part of Mrs. R's design theory was that the separation of the service wings and those activities from the family wing. And here you see the service cell of the home, which includes the kitchen, the pantry, the delivery areas, as well as servant quarters at the back of the house. And in her essay, she wrote of the importance of having an area that was, quote, accessible to the butcher and the grocer, that would leave the remainder of the house unmolested, end quote. So she did not want to have those two functions being intermingling. The arts and crafts movement, though it originated in England, translated well into American culture. Arts and crafts philosophers stressed the importance of architecture that reflected the country's own history, geography, and climate, reviving vernacular expressions in architecture. Buildings should be organic, looking as though they belong in the environment in which they sat, using local materials and reflecting honesty in construction. So American designers took these concepts and adapted them to their own liking. In the American West, you see Spanish and Japanese influences that are manifested in that temperate climate. The Midwest made use of the prairie for inspiration. The Eastern United States drew from English and colonial design in the past. And this is an original sketch by Olive Arms. The drawing inspiration for the sitting room part from America's colonial past. And you can see kind of, again, the cooking hearth and the small ovens to the left that are meant to represent American colonial history. And here is the hearth as it was executed. Again, you can see the hand-wrought iron details in the fireplace hood and decorations at the side, and then the kitchen-style fireplace and oven. The products of the arts and crafts movement, though they are aesthetically appealing, were created in the context of the social reforms proposed by Carlyle, Ruskin, and Morris, and many others. Proponents of the philosophy aim to reestablish the virtues of craftsmanship, freedom of thought and creativity, and the restoration of beauty in everyday surroundings. As a reflection of this philosophy, Morris and others attempted to establish a platform for spreading arts and crafts ideals through the creation of craft guilds or small firms that would design and fabricate furniture, textiles, pottery, stained glass, and other objects that would be for sale to the public. And within these small societies, artisans were given creative freedom where they could construct quality goods from start to finish. And they came up with the concept, they executed it, and they sold their work. So Olive Arms, again, as an example of following this ideal, this philosophy, hired true artisans to outfit her home with handmade finishes. And here's a sketch of the entry door at Greystone, which consists of 7 iron hinges, hand-wrought iron details with an ivy motif, as well as hand-blown and bullseye glass in the windows. And I'll show you how that was executed here in the actual door itself. So again, from design to execution was the goal. And rather than factory workers who made single pieces of a larger whole, artisans were able to construct full projects from start to finish. When Olive and Wilford Arms decided to build Greystone, many American architects who were specialized specializing in arts and crafts style, believed in the concept of total design. And that was the freedom to conceive and design a home from the exterior to the interior, including all of the decorative arts and accessories inside. Every object was made to conform to the same design philosophy. Perhaps this is why Olive Arms chose architects Frank L. Mead and Abram Garfield, the son of American President James Garfield, to help her bring Greystone to life, because Mead and Garfield were not strictly defined as arts and crafts architects. As you may have inferred from the quotes that I shared already, Olive Arms was quite headstrong and didn't want, again, the architects to build their home. She wanted them to build her home. So total design was not going to work for her. She wanted lots and lots of input in how her home would turn out. Here we see an early 1900s image of Greystone's reception room. And Olive Arms was, again, not an adherent of the total design concept. She really embraced what's called eclecticism, a little bit of everything. A lot of history from family, a lot of heirlooms that were handed down from generation to generation, etc. So she subscribed to arts and crafts, but also believed in making one's home personal. So in her Story of My House essay, she wrote, architects are more or less specialists, building well only one type of architecture. One man's taste is for the severely classical, another for the picturesque. So I would select one whose taste and style of the architecture I like best. But it must also be remembered that an architect may have excellent taste in making an attractive exterior and unable to plan a practical interior. And as you're unable to have two architects, best to see to it yourself that your home is planned completely ere the foundation is laid, you are not to be disappointed later. So Olive Arms' inspiration came from several places. Her artistic background gave her an outlet for her creativity, and she was able to sketch ideas to share with the architect. Her artistic skills also lent themselves to borrowing design ideas from other places where she saw things that she found interesting. Several of the design elements used in Greystone were inspired by other homes. Olive Arms sketched designs that she had seen, modified them to her own taste, and then had them recreated in her home. Projects throughout Europe yielded many ideas that would be adopted at Greystone, including the design for the reception room fireplace, based on one that Olive had seen in Holland. And this is her sketch of that fireplace. With the completion of her home in 1905, Olive and Wilfred Arms moved in and began to furnish their new home. Early photographs of the interior demonstrate the purest incarnation of the arts and crafts aesthetic within Greystone. Throughout the home are marks of hand craftsmanship, such as the hand-hammered ironwork in the dining room fireplace here. You have hand-blown glass, woodwork, and finishes in here in the reception room, again, gold by glass, woodwork, ironwork, etc., that were all handmade. Olive Arms employed the arts and crafts philosophy of using natural materials that would beautify the time, as did happen, and we have the original woodwork and iron that, again, 120 years ago, still looked just as beautiful as the day that they were installed. Here we have examples of exposed human stonework that is throughout the home as well. You had in the dining room canapes and bureaus. There were, which no longer exists because that room was renovated later, which we'll talk about shortly. But you also have painted canvas wall coverings with stenciling, et cetera, throughout the house as well. Medieval influence abounds with barrel vaulted ceilings, Gothic arches, and images of heraldic knights and ladies. These stained glass windows were originally mounted above the front stairlift landing of gravestone, and they were later replaced by the series of stained glass windows, in front of which Olive and Wilford were married. But these windows tell the tale of brave knights heading off to battle, idealizing that simplicity and chivalry of medieval life. The use, is from the kitchen, a little squirrel-shaped gas jet. So at the time the house was built, there was electricity, but it was not always reliable, so we had the alternative to use gas jet lighting when needed. But nature and natural forms is a prominent recurring theme in the design of gravestone as well. So you have a depiction of animals, and flora in the ironwork, the stained glass, and the wall finishes. Oh yeah. The ironwork throughout the house is all custom for the house, and you see a lot of recurring motifs with ivy and different kinds of floral light that all sound interesting, and even some horrific creatures, little serpents, little lashes, and things. It's fun to go through and just kind of do like a little high five with some of the details in the house, because there's some real interesting details that we miss. And even working here 28 years, every time I walk in, it's like you can catch something different or something that maybe you haven't noticed before or haven't focused on before, I suppose. But Olive was definitely enamored with nature and her outdoor surroundings. Here's a wonderful picture of Olive's farms in her open porch with one of her Irish setters from the early part of the 20th century. But in her essay, again, which we refer to a few times throughout here, she says, I cannot think of a house by itself without including as an essential part of it its outward surroundings and external nature. The wood that provide its joists and rafters, the earth that supplies its mortar, brick, and stone, the cold plants that derive its heat, the lake that provides water, the trees that ward off the suffocating winds in winter and shield it from the sun in summer, and the garden that provides its flowers. So Olive and Wilford undertook the design of a beautiful landscape for their home. Again, that would be just as important as the interior. Early photographs show a neatly manicured front lawn with topiaries and large garden pots. Their garden views reveal masses of hollyhocks, as you see here. This is right in front of the carriage house, and Wilford Arms is hiding, peeking out with his straw hat behind one of the hollyhocks there. Olive Arms strove to create outdoor rooms for her home, which was another common characteristic of arts and crafts design. So we have not just a view, but a room, an outdoor room where you would go and spend time so you would, do things you enjoy. Here's the southeast corner of the home, and again, the image I showed of Olive sitting there with her Irish setter. She was sitting on this porch, which could be reached from both the library and the living room from inside the home. And she wrote, the living room is the real house, with the casement doors opening on the terrace. From this room, you should have a view of the garden and attractive views. The advantage of this is that it is an actual part of the house. And here you can see what you, from the rear of the house, some of the things that she had in her outdoor living space. And her design didn't just stop with the architecture and details of the home. She designed and had artisans built furnishings
that would help complement their surroundings. Here's a sketch of a set that Audubon designed, a three-piece side table chair and mirror set. And have these three pieces built that were used and are still in the carriage entrance of the home. The finished pieces are very heavy, solid oak with iron details. And here is a picture of the actual table and mirror from that set in the carriage entrance. A Gothic bedroom set. This bedroom set originally occupied Gopher's bedroom on the second floor and was executed in lime oak with intricate carved ornaments and arches. Again, that Gothic medieval aesthetic as part of the home design. And then a kitchen table and chair set with sketch depicts the kitchen table and chairs that were used in the service wing of the home, the kitchen actually. And here they are as they were produced. Done in oak with heart-shaped cutouts and mimics the set that was found in another home from which Audubon took inspiration. So again, she did not mind borrowing ideas from others. Olive's design aesthetic did not remain static through her lifetime, and she lived to be 95 years old, so you would imagine that she had some changes both in her ideas and her needs as she lived her life in the home. By the early 1920s, her tastes were becoming a little more formal, and various rooms of Grace were remodeled accordingly. The changes were most dramatic in the library and the dining room. Here you have the before version of the library fireplace, and then the after. So you have that more Gothic, dark, heavier wood in the ironwork in the way that it was done originally, and then more of a formal Tudor makeover after in the 1920s. So the library received again sort of a Tudor-style makeover with lined oak paneling and formal ceiling toppers. The fireplace was the most dramatic change. She added a new library table and freestanding cabinet that she designed to complete the new look. In the dining room, the walls were painted a lush green and herb details were added to the cabinetry. The tiled fireplace was covered by a ship motif, as you can see here, and a new dining table that was large enough to accommodate a dozen guests per cabin. And that's the table. Sometime in the 1920s, Audubon decided to close her front porch and her side, and also the side entrance porch, which faced Lake Avenue. And by this time, you can imagine the steel industry in those terms of booming. The byproducts of the steel mills were black soot, smelly, air, and also lots of increased traffic along Lake Avenue. So the porch was closed and became a solarium, in which Audubon remained connected with nature by hanging potted plants with flowers around the room. So how did this wonderful residence come into the possession of Mahone Valley Historical Society? In her later years, Audubon was unfortunately all but crippled by arthritis. But before she became confined to her home, she took an interest in the operations of a struggling organization, the Mahone Valley Historical Society. Olive's distant cousin James L. Lake Jr. was the president of the society, and Olive's father, Charles David Arms, had been one of the founding members since 1875. So according to her secretary, Dorothy Welch, Olive Arms' interest in the society stemmed from the desire that future generations of Youngstown residents would not lose sight of their area's history. Olive Arms' purpose to provide a place where local history would be recorded and where residents would be exposed to her home's unique architecture and the beautiful and unusual things that she had collected over the years. So to that end, Olive Arms gave her an entrance known to her friend, Mrs. Butler, who conveyed the message to MVHS President James Elwick Jr. that she was interested in leaving her home and its contents to the Historical Society so they could make a home there, so to this. But her caveat was that the first floor remained as it was and Penny was there. And I for one am grateful that she made that a stipulation because it is quite an extraordinary home and with a wonderful history that we get to share with those who come to see it. So Olive Arms died August 25th of 1960, and Greystone was transferred to MVHS at a meeting of the Society's trustees and executors of Olive Arms Estate on March 30th, 1961. So Dorothy Welch, who was Mrs. Arms' secretary, became the first director of the Arms Museum, which opened to the public in 1964. And here's a picture of those trustees meetings to transfer the property from Olive Estate to Hunting Valley Historical Society. And that is all I have for my presentation today. Does anybody have any questions about Greystone Arts and Crafts?
Were they able to find artists and craftspeople locally to do the handwork, or did they have to bring them in from the city for?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, we don't know. We assumed they were local or regional craftspeople, but we don't have records of who exactly performed the ironwork or woodwork in the house. Those are the kinds, I love Olive's foresight in having saved some of the things that she did, images and things, and then there are others that she probably thought, nobody's going to care about this, and, so we don't have those records. Yes?
Were they planning on moving before their arms?
Yes. So they had purchased a property in Liberty and built a carriage house. I think it's Sodom Hutchins. Anybody still? Where was the property?
It was off Warner Road,
Sodom Hutchins, yeah. And so there's, the carriage house still exists that they built there. And became subdivided into apartments. But they were planning, before they did the renovations of the home, they were planning to build a new property, finished property. And unfortunately, then the Great Depression happened, and Wilford becomes sick and he passed away in 1947. So those plans were abandoned, and all of us, stayed in the home and kind of adapted it again as she needed it during the remainder of her life, which again she passed away in 1960. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look, but yeah, we have her handwritten essay. Well, it's actually typewritten, but some handwritten on it. And it's on Realty Press Company letterhead, who Wilford Arms was the vice president of Realty Press Company. We know it was written with that, but we don't know. Well, I don't know off the top of my head. I have to, yeah. Sure, yeah. Well, originally the stone that the house was made, it's limestone. Before the 1970s, when Hunting Valley Historical Society sandblasted this stone, it was gray. It's now tan, but you can see on the interior of the building, especially in the full area, which was the open porch that was closed, you can see the original color of the stone. Well, we know that it was in the in Olive Arms Terrace house, which was the house next door, which is now the Holy Trinity remaining Orthodox Church. And so all of the Goldbergs were married in that home, and they were married in front of those windows. We do have a picture of the windows and the
outside and take a picture of them, but, she had to move it back to nursing home to her hospital.
So she was in her home her whole life. She was basically confined to the second floor, from what we understand, at the end of her life. But she, had caregivers and staff, so she was big with the family. Yes. No. No, unfortunately, again, we don't have records of the, we have original plans, but we don't have any information about costs, or who was hired in the actual extraction of the home.
Much of the upstairs area has been remodeled.
So all of the rooms are still intact as they were, and eventually we're hoping, to, bring back maybe a couple of the rooms in order to give people an example of what the second floor was like. We do have pictures of what the rooms were like, because, luckily they took them from the photo record. But, so all the rooms are intact. I think they drywall, right? So, yeah, they drywall all the over all the plaster. There is like a lower ceiling, suitable tile ceiling, because there are modern beams and, above that, with HVAC and electrical and things like that. But really, the minimal changes were done, just to make some kind of useful for the spaces.
How long did it take to complete the house?
Probably a couple of years. I think, was it started in 1904? Okay, so we go by the number 1905 for completion, so at least a year, if not, even 18 months or so. Yes. Not that I am aware of. Did she ever correspond with the cyber to go into? The content, we do have furnishings from the second floor, yes. Not everything, but, we have bedrooms, the soffit, bedroom stuff that I showed you earlier, things like that, decorated the bedrooms and sitting rooms, yes, we do. The home, well, we have insurance, so there, there is that. I couldn't tell you the number off the top of my head, but, there was an appraisal of the contents of the home in 1917, which we do have, which is wonderful resource again in our archives, so that's fun to look at. Anything else? Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, it was, when the house was built, there was no plumbing, there was electricity, there was, all of the monitoring. Again, the electricity could be a little spotty, so there was the gas jet option if needed, but, yes, it's always had all of the modern communities. And that would have been after the remodel, in the library that was added. So that would have been original in 1905. But, yeah, furniture that would have been all locally crafted.
Was there a living staff that maintained the house?
Currently,
No.
was there again? I don't, unfortunately, I don't live there. Yeah, there was living staff, yes. There was, a chauffeur who lived in the, Carriage House building, and a housekeeper who was able to live in. There were also two small bedrooms on the second floor for living staff as well. So there was staff living in the security house and the main house, in the service house.
The house next door was built by Rick.
Yes.
Who's that?
When was it built?
1906.
The George Bennett house, which is now owned by YSU and used as, home. Any questions? Well, you gave me my money worth today, everybody. Thank you.